By late morning, Paradise no longer looked like a town. It looked like a war zone. Entire neighborhoods had vanished beneath towering flames. Cars lined the roads, many abandoned after running out of fuel or becoming trapped in gridlock. Thick black smoke turned daylight into darkness. Visibility dropped to only a few feet. People couldn't tell where the road ended and the fire began. The campfire was creating its own weather. Burning embers were carried by powerful winds more than a mile ahead of the main fire, igniting homes, businesses, and forests almost instantly. Firefighters later described trying to stop hundreds of separate fires at once. Every time one blaze was contained, another erupted just blocks away. The fire was moving faster than emergency crews could possibly respond. Hospitals and care facilities faced impossible decisions. Nurses rushed elderly patients into wheelchairs and loaded them into ambulances while smoke poured through the hallways. At the Feather River Hospital, doctors evacuated patients as flames surrounded the building. Within hours, one of Paradise's most important medical centers had been destroyed. Schools were evacuated as teachers tried to keep frightened children calm. Some school buses drove through walls of smoke so thick that drivers could barely see the pavement. Parents had no way of knowing where their children were. Cell phone networks were overwhelmed. Thousands of families were separated, each fearing the worst. As the fire consumed block after block, police officers and firefighters went door to door searching for anyone left behind. Many found elderly residents who refused to leave because they believed they could save their homes. Others simply didn't realize how quickly the fire was approaching. Every minute of delay became more dangerous. One firefighter later recalled hearing cries for help from a burning neighborhood. He and his crew rescued several residents trapped inside their vehicles. Moments later, the entire street was engulfed in flames. He would later say they escaped by less than a minute. Another survivor described abandoning her car after traffic came to a complete stop. Carrying only her dog, she ran through smoke so dense she could barely breathe. Burning embers fell around her like rain. She later said she never expected to survive. For many, there was no escape. The campfire ultimately claimed 85 lives, making it the deadliest wildfire in California's recorded history at the time. Many victims were elderly residents who could not evacuate quickly enough. Others became trapped in vehicles as traffic ground to a halt. Recovery teams spent weeks searching through the ashes for human remains. Some victims could only be identified through DNA testing because the fire had burned so intensely. The destruction was almost beyond comprehension. More than 18,800 structures were destroyed, including homes, schools, churches, businesses, and public buildings. Nearly 14,000 homes disappeared. Entire neighborhoods were erased from the map. More than 153,000 acres of land were burned before firefighters finally gained control. The financial cost was staggering. Direct losses exceeded $16.5 billion in 2018. Adjusted for today's value, the disaster represents well over $20 billion in economic losses, making it one of the costliest wildfires in American history. As the flames slowly weakened, another battle began. More than 5,000 firefighters from across California and neighboring states worked around the clock to contain the blaze. Helicopters and air tankers dropped millions of gallons of water and fire retardant onto the burning landscape. Search and rescue teams entered neighborhoods that were still dangerously hot, hoping to find survivors. Then came the heartbreaking task of helping those who had lost everything. Thousands of displaced families crowded into emergency shelters. Schools, churches, and community centers opened their doors. Volunteers arrived from across the country with food, blankets, clothing, and medical supplies. Donations poured in from every corner of America. In the middle of unimaginable loss, acts of kindness reminded survivors that they were not alone. One resident returned weeks later hoping to find something, anything, that had survived. All that remained of his home was a cracked stone fireplace standing alone in a field of ash. Nearby, he found a small family photo, burned around the edges but still recognizable. It became the only possession he was able to save. Another family discovered their wedding rings buried beneath the rubble of their home. Though everything else had been destroyed, those rings became a symbol that some memories can survive even the most devastating disaster. Investigators eventually determined that the campfire was caused by a faulty electric transmission line owned by Pacific Gas and Electric Company. Strong winds had damaged the aging equipment, sending sparks into the dry vegetation below. Combined with drought conditions and extremely low humidity, those sparks ignited a fire that spread with terrifying speed. The disaster triggered widespread investigations into wildfire prevention, emergency evacuations, and utility maintenance. California strengthened wildfire safety regulations, expanded vegetation management, improved emergency alert systems, and increased investment in power line inspections. Utilities also began implementing public safety power shutoffs during periods of extreme fire danger to reduce the risk of future catastrophic fires. But perhaps the greatest lesson came from the people of Paradise themselves. Many returned to rebuild despite overwhelming odds. New homes slowly replaced the ashes. Schools reopened. Businesses welcomed customers once again. The road to recovery has been long, but the determination of the community has never disappeared. If you live in an area threatened by wildfires, prepare before an emergency begins. Know multiple evacuation routes. Keep an emergency kit ready. Follow evacuation orders immediately. Waiting just a few extra minutes can make the difference between survival and tragedy. If you value true stories that honor the victims, celebrate the heroes, and preserve the lessons history has taught us, subscribe to American Disaster Files and leave a like. In our next documentary, we'll uncover another American disaster that forever changed the nation and reveal the human stories hidden behind the headlines. The campfire did more than destroy a town. It exposed how quickly modern life can disappear when extreme weather, dry landscapes, and failing infrastructure collide. It also revealed something stronger than the flames themselves: the resilience of ordinary people who refused to let their community be forgotten. Because every burned home once held birthdays, family dinners, and lifelong memories. Every name on the list of victims belonged to someone who was loved. And every lesson learned from Paradise carries a responsibility to protect the next community before history has another chance to repeat itself. As the firestorm raced through Paradise, another invisible battle was unfolding above the flames. The intense heat created towering columns of smoke that rose thousands of feet into the atmosphere. Burning embers were carried by powerful winds, igniting new fires far ahead of the main blaze. Firefighters called it spotting, one of the most dangerous behaviors of a wildfire because it allowed the fire to leap over roads, rivers, and fire breaks in a matter of seconds. Residents who believed they had escaped the flames suddenly found themselves surrounded again. Some were forced to abandon their vehicles and run toward open parking lots or empty fields. Others sheltered inside buildings that had somehow survived the first wave of fire, hoping they would withstand the next. Every decision had to be made in seconds, often with almost no visibility. The fire burned so intensely that metal warped, glass melted, and entire neighborhoods were reduced to ash. Investigators later found that many homes were destroyed not only by direct flames, but also by wind-driven embers that entered attics, vents, and rooftops. A single glowing ember, no larger than a coin, could ignite an entire house within minutes. Emergency responders worked without rest. Many firefighters had already been battling other wildfires across California before the campfire erupted. Exhausted crews continued searching for survivors while protecting the few structures that still stood. Helicopter pilots flew through thick smoke, and bulldozer operators carved emergency fire breaks in desperate attempts to slow the advancing Inferno. Even after the flames passed, the danger remained. Hot spots continued burning beneath the rubble for days, fallen power lines blocked rescue routes, and unstable buildings threatened search teams. For the people of Paradise, surviving the fire was only the beginning. The long journey of recovery was about to test the community in ways no one could have imagined.